So namaskar, everyone, and friends. A very, very warm welcome to everyone. You know, the work from home, we all chatting, makes the day start and end so quickly. Week just flies with a blink of an eye, and it is already 6 months that I have not seen the security personnel at the airport. But yes, the silver lining is that the city of Bangalore has a beautiful weather with clean air and a beautiful sky, 23 degrees. Cricket is resumed back in our complex, and we're looking forward to playing a game tomorrow morning. And I hope wherever you all are, things are looking good, and everyone is taking a good care of themselves, keeping healthy, because finding a right balance between personal and professional life can be tough, but being fit, healthy, and happy improves work performance and morale. You know, in my discussion with many of our clients, largely C-level leadership, we very commonly chat about culture, and we started defining it as people's attitudes and behaviors which reflects companies shared values, experiences, and aspirations. The question that comes up is, how do you interact with your colleagues, clients? How do you provide an environment which enables everyone to kind of succeed? Does your culture allows diversity of thought, that you can make your workplace vibrant and interesting place to work? Culture also needs a dedicated focus on gender equality and people of all sexual orientations and sexual identities, disabilities, and make them feel comfortable and secure at work. And having a diverse and inclusive workforce is in fact becoming or recognized as instrumental in improving the company's performance, and an imperative that organizations can no longer choose to ignore. But it is asked often, if diversity and inclusion efforts initiated are for feel-good reason, is it a public relation vehicle? Uh, I'm not an expert on this subject, in fact, quite naive. But my work gives me an opportunity to speak with multiple leaders and stakeholders. And, you know, I get this feel that there is a need to scrutinize the extent to which the rhetoric of diversity and inclusion meets the reality. It is important to ensure, you know, that organizations, that it is just not a, it is not reduced to tokenism, and it has been seen as fair by the organizations, you know, this entire diversity and inclusion piece. And I've come across a lot of these organizations where areas of practices for inclusion have been largely related for recruitment or training, but a sustained inclusive practices, approaches, and measures are still missing. In fact, when employee feels included, it is in a true sense beyond mere lip service. They're able to bring the whole of themselves to the organization. It enables effective problem solving, creativity, innovation, enhanced performance, and in multiple ways. You know, I'm keenly looking forward to hearing from a group of leaders today, and you know, what exactly do diversity and inclusion means, what influences diversity and inclusion, how do you manage issues around them, what role do leadership and organizations play, and much more. Friends, let's welcome a very experienced and diverse panel of leaders who have stood strongly for this subject and have built some outstanding robust case studies in their organizations. So let me do a brief intro of everyone. We have Manisha Agarwal, Associate Director and Head People and Organization at Puma India, Padmaja Alagnandan, Chief People Officer, PwC India, Pallavi Kumar, Head Diversity and Inclusion, Reliance Industries Limited, and Parmesh Sahani, Head Godrej India Cultural Lab. And to moderate the conversation, we have a dynamic Suresh Raina, a partner, Hunt Partners. Audience, if you have any questions, do key in. And Suresh, a very warm welcome again. The screen is all yours. I will return towards the end to speak with you all on what's happening in your life other than work. And till then, I've taken the best seat for an insightful conversation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deepak. I would not be able to do it the way you do and the way you conduct events and you hold the conferences, the annual event that I would be visiting, and I'm already missing the event, but I'll try my best. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, we all are missing Suresh Rana everywhere, sir. So I'm sure you'll do a great job.
Thank you. And I'm pleased to have the August panel here with me. All of them practitioners, all of them passionate champions of this subject, which everybody talks, in my opinion, but the progress is slow. At least that is what we have observed. That's what I have observed. And what we will try and decipher over the course of the next hour is what is, I guess we'll start with what is diversity and inclusion. Maybe that's a good place to start. And then lead into what are the organizations doing about it. From each of the panelists, we'll try and understand how each one of them and their organizations and their colleagues, peers are addressing this big agenda. And then maybe towards the end, we may try and consolidate a few takeaways. So here we start. So maybe I remember Padmaja when we were speaking ahead of this event, and you posed this question, if I remember. What is D&I? We keep reading about it, we keep hearing about it. Maybe you may want to start with that. What is D&I? How are organizations looking at it? That would be a good opening statement for this panel today.
Thank you, Suresh. Morning to everyone. Hope all families are well and safe. So, to your question, I think particularly for older generation like myself, who've been in the workplace for more than 2.5 decades, it's when you start working, it's something you just kind of take for granted, right? That you do what it takes, and half the time I was very fond of saying that I don't remember that you're a woman because you're a professional, you do what it takes. But having become a little older and wiser, hopefully older for sure, wiser I'm not so sure. If we just think about this whole point on diversity, inclusion, why it matters, 2-3 thoughts from my side, right, Suresh? I think the first is that if we look at any business, if I take the example of my organization, right, we are in the knowledge business, and we are saying very clearly that our external ecosystem expects us to have more diverse workforce, right, who comes to the engagements that we work with on clients. So we have many clients who say, tell us about your teams, how diverse are they, right? What's the gender mix? What are other kinds of dimensions of diversity? In some countries, we see that the regulators actually ask, right? Regulators want to know how diverse, for example, in one country, the regulator said, how many proportion of the lead auditors are women? So I think the first thing I would say is that we are seeing that the external ecosystem is expecting this because people genuinely believe that when you have more diverse viewpoints that come into creating an outcome, it is better. And I think experience has taught all of us that, right? There's enough research out there. You have more diverse views on the table and you have better outcomes, simply because then you reflect a microcosm of society. If I take a consumer products organization, right, I'm sure the minds that work on creating products need to reflect.
Padmaja, we're not able to hear you. While we are waiting
create a culture where they are comfortable voicing their views, right? So that's really how the two sides of the coin come in. That you create a diverse workforce, but then you have a culture wherein everyone is comfortable voicing their views. And to me, that's really the whole business case for diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Padmaja, for sharing that. And I would also maybe a good hygiene point. Instead of me posing the questions, I would also welcome the panelists to maybe come back and raise a comment or reply. so that it flows like a conversation. I have a bunch of questions. In fact, not only I have questions that I've got questions from the audience also coming in. So I already have maybe 5 or 6 questions coming in the chat box.
No, I think
So
Okay.
yeah, Manisha.
jumping into Padmaja's views also, and to elaborate this further, what is diversity, right? That's the basic question that we should also answer before we deep dive further into this discussion. And I mean, many times diversity is kind of mistaken just for gender diversity. So I think we should make this very clear to the audience right away that diversity could be seen in many forms. And it's not just gender, it is age, it is generational, it is sexual orientation, it is region, caste, creed, your social status, people with disabilities. So all kinds of diversity. And as we are just, at this, I think in this phase of where we are, the corporate world is, we've just scratched the surface of what is diversity. And I remember Pallavi mentioning a very relevant point earlier that actually speaking, even within a person, there could be so many different diversities that, even when you have a woman, there could be a kind of a personality of a woman and a kind of a personality of a man. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Are we allowing our corporates to appreciate and respect all kinds of diversity, all kinds of viewpoints? And that, I think, in my opinion, is the whole big discussion that we are having today.
That gives me the perfect segue to come to Parmesh. Parmesh, I haven't read your book, but I read the critique on the book. That's always a good place. But maybe I should ask you to share your thoughts. But before you share your thoughts, please also tell us what prompted you to write the book.
So sure, thanks Suresh, and it's really nice to be with everyone else, Manisha, Padmaja, Pallavi, Deepak, Hari. I love, each of you. I love the work that you all are doing in your organizations, and I really love the CEO lounge tables. I'm kind of blocking my calendars for future conversations as well. So thank you for doing this, and to everyone. We have more than 100 people attending as well, so thank you so much. I wrote the book for a bunch of reasons. First, I happen to be an person in corporate India. And I really, especially after these multiple verdicts, right? We had a 2009 Delhi High Court verdict that was pro-LGBTQ. We had a ridiculous 2013 verdict, which reversed this 2009 verdict. Then we had we had a NALSA judgment of 2014, rights to privacy of 2017, and finally this 2018 Supreme Court verdict, which decriminalized being LGBTQ in India. And while looking at this change, I was also witnessing both within my own company, as well as in so many companies all around us, a real impetus towards including LGBTQ individuals. So I wrote the book, honestly, to chronicle my own journey, some of the work that we've done, recognize the incredible work which is already happening all around us in so many Indian companies, irrespective of the trajectory, of these cases in the courts, and share some of the incredible stories of change. Because I think for all of us who are practicing D&I, we use two broad methods of persuasion, because that's where it is, right? Pallavi said earlier, we're still in very early stages. Manisha said this as well. One is we use statistics and numbers, which are very hard to find in our country. But even then, so for example, in my book, I say, the LGBTQ economy in India is about $200 billion. The cost of homophobia, according to the World Bank, is $32 billion, and so on. So it makes sense. Or there's a Deloitte study that says that focusing on D&I improves your innovation potential by 8 times, right? 8x. Oh, so there's enough of that data that we have. But really, I think persuasion through numbers, through business cases and all only takes you so far, because where we are in is that we have to change the culture. That's when the magic happens. And you change the culture by telling powerful stories of change. So I wrote the book also to chronicle some of these incredible stories, like Anubhuti, a friend at Tata Steel, who transitioned in Jamshedpur with Tata Steel's support, and who has now become an incredible champion. Anupati's photograph hangs in, the Tata headquarters right below JRD Tata's photograph as a change agent. Or Mohul, this incredible trans man at the Lalit group. The Lalit, Mohul was one of the first people to avail of the Lalit's group gender affirmation benefits and transitioned while at Lalit, has now become such an incredible champion, an incredible employee, an incredible advocate. So to tell some of these stories, including my own, to show people how really when you include, you create win-win scenarios, right? You make more money, you are more innovative, you attract the best talent. So I don't see why anyone would choose to exclude when everything out there is telling you. The numbers are telling you, the stories are telling you, everything is telling you that inclusion makes sense. So I wrote the book to share this with people specifically. Also to share with people that for companies who are interested in this now, you don't have to reinvent the wheel or start an ecosystem. The truth is, all of us have been living in this ecosystem for the past decade. So you want to bring about sensitization, there are 20 agencies out there that you can hire. You want to hire queer people, PWD, etc. There are so many consultancies that will help you specifically with hiring. You want to focus on mental health, again, 20 organizations out there already. You want to work within FICCI, CII, whatever, they're all already focusing on it, right? So job fairs, I mean, there's a whole ecosystem out there. All of us who are early in this space are really waiting for the rest of you, these 119 people who are on this webinar. Come join us, hang out with us, and just co-create this world with us already. If it's for your benefit. So that's why I wrote the book. Here it is. If you haven't read it already, this is a good time to like open that next window and order it on the side. And, it gives you a manual for how you can actually make this happen. So I'm just like very, very happy that I'm talking about it in this space. So thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would now invite Pallavi, and I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and I'm sure you will have a view on it. I read in the article that I was reading where Parmesh said that Indian companies are not homophobic. They are only ignorant. And because on the panel today, you do represent not only an Indian company, just a regular Indian company, we are talking about the largest Indian company now. So it would be nice to hear when we talk about Indian organizations, which are very particular about Danda, about ROI, investments, and we are a resource crunched country. So what is the view? How do Indian organizations look at this subject?
Sure, Suresh, and thanks for actually sharing, because while Parmesh was speaking, like I just wanted to add on, and I think this will cover the response as well. So first I would like to really thank Parmesh, for getting up with this book again. Like I remember when I started my journey in corporate as a D&I practitioner, that time I got to know about you through your first book. And today, when we are meeting here, there is another book coming away. So
you only have to wait a few years and there is the next one coming.
So I think there were two very powerful points, and then I'll build on the answer, and I think that will cover the response as well, Suresh. So, when we say diversity of how we define, there were two very valid points that I was listening, we are covering, something that we know is diversity, something we don't know is also diversity. And the question you right now you mentioned comes in the third area where, we don't know actually what we know. And that's the area where we don't talk much about. So definitely sexual identity, sexual orientation is not something we are introduced to as a society, that has not been inbuilt in our education system. We don't have those conversations at home. So, our social conditioning is very unique. Now the things are changing for sure. Like millennials, we see they are very, very comfortable and they're very open to have conversation. Even there are a lot of, Gen X and seniors who are very, very open to such conversations. The times are changing for sure, but it is a gradual process and we need to talk about it more. So if I have to say about Reliance, as we all know that, there is a flexible mindset that Reliance has, like, the way business expansion is happening, trying to address the diverse needs of the customer. And the moment we say diverse needs, there is a diverse customer base as well, and they all have very unique needs. And it covers all the diversity we just spoke about, be it gender, be it sexual identity, be it disability, be it generations, be it social backgrounds, and also the personality types that we spoke about. So those are definitely the conversation we need to have more. So I think we have been listening to our internal customers, which are employees, and the external customers as well. But that conscious effort is something which is building now, and we are putting it on the agenda loud and clear that yes, we are looking at it. We are here to have, very make conscious efforts, partner with the right organizations, and there is lots already happening in this space. It's just about that one-stop information space where organization can go leverage it, collaborate more, and benefit from each other, learn from each other, and contextualize. So I feel yes, there is a long way to go. Awareness in Indian organization is definitely picked up in last few years. There is a lot of awareness focus in this area of sexual identity, and I would say there are certain organizations which are taking it forward. It is not LGBTQIA plus, but they're actually now even trying to prepare their knowledge base in the area, how L challenges or is different than G, then B, then T. So, that actually gives us a lot of hope and positivity. And it's the knowledge, and then knowledge, obviously, that there are groups working, so it translates into action as well. So that's where we are. So awareness largely is the focus, but there's also some very good work happening in the area of, mainstreaming inclusion in a sustained way, which I was referring before as well. So in Reliance also, we are trying to embed that, and we're trying to see how we can, our system needs to speak about inclusion rather than, we talking about it. Employee needs to experience inclusion, and they need to talk about it rather than, we going out and, talking about that, what it is. So the focus is largely on creating the inclusive culture. It's a long, long journey and a very, very deep journey. But yes, I do agree on that. So that's the view.
I have my next question for Padmaja, and the context is the ecosystem. Because many a times I've heard that manufacturing may not be the right environment for women, for example. Now, given that you're part of a very large organization, and it's not without reason that PwC is called Big Four, one of the Big Four. It's global, and it is services. Now, if you could share maybe some perspective on the ecosystem, the environment, the nature of the work, and how can not only services companies, but we'll of course start with services companies. Is there a preference for one over the other when it comes to D&I?
Yeah. So Suresh, I mean, really love the discussions and all the different perspectives that are coming. I guess that's part of the whole diversity of discussion, right? Which is great. On this whole point about certain gender, this thing doesn't suit, or age, this doesn't suit.
Padmaja? We're having some...
point is for that. Am I audible?
Padmaja? No, there is a...
Am I audible?
Now you are. Would you like to turn off your video? Because I think that may solve the problem for a minute.
Let me just do that for a minute. Yes. Normally bandwidth is good. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay. Now we can hear you.
Great. I was just saying, I think the whole point is the choice has to be left to the individual, right? Sometimes you find that, there is the whole well-meaning, within quotes, patriarch. It doesn't have to be gender-based. It's not a gender construct, but the choice on, do I want to work in manufacturing? Do I want to work late hours? That choice is with the individual. Everyone should decide what works for them. And I think organizations have to show sensitivity to everybody. But I think where it, really becomes a problem is if there's a stereotyping that something doesn't work for everyone, right? That's the first point I want to make. Second is, since you spoke on gender, I actually find, when we have our town halls, so many young women who are extremely, they don't want to be in any way, patronized or have these assumptions made. They want that choice to be left to them. So some may say that, in fact, the biggest point, that question that comes up very often is, when are you going to have paternity leave, which is as much as maternity leave? Because it's also important that in the workplace, you don't reiterate or perpetrate any stereotypes, right? You say it's parental leave. It is a parental benefit, creche, subsidy. I mean, it's just available to everyone, right? So I think that's the important point, that first, the choice has to be to the individual. It shouldn't be to the organization to stereotype. I think the second point I want to make on ecosystem, Suresh, is enough research has shown that all said and done, when you have a minimum number, it makes a difference, right? I think whether it's on race. I mean, recently in our US firm, we took a very bold step and published a report called the Transparency Report, just about what is the diversity in our workplace. Not just gender, but racial background, sexual orientation, differently abled. So that report is out in the open, in the public domain, to say that how many, in terms of promotion percentages, how does it vary across each of these. So it's really putting your, money where your mouth is, to say we really believe in this. But in so much of research, what we see is that when there's a minimum ecosystem, right, it gives that critical mass to really foster the inclusion. So whether it's on sexual orientation, gender, it's like I've heard people talk of in boards. You have one woman in a board of 16 versus 2 versus 3. I think it's just that much more conducive to open discussions, open conversations. So I think we shouldn't just chase numbers, but I think they just help us ensure that we are creating an ecosystem. So, I mean, that's what I would believe.
Thank you, Padmaja. I wanted to ask Manisha my next question. This is for you, Manisha. I remember Puma, because Padmaja was talking about numbers and ratios. So I remember you mentioning that you already have a fairly high diversity ratio in the organization. And so I wanted to ask you, how has that happened? What has helped? What have been the levers which have contributed to this significant increase, the number that you see here today?
Yeah, I think Suresh, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, this is when we were discussing before the session. So actually speaking, at Puma, we have about 50% representation of women in the leadership team. And when this whole talk around diversity and inclusion started happening a couple of years back, is when we actually started thinking about how did we manage this piece. And just like Parmesh pointed out, actually we all have been living with inclusion for a long, long time. It's just that now we've started to understand this better. Now we've started to recognize it better. And if we just, sometimes, you don't even have to do much to just let this happen. Having said that, we actually sat down to understand what could have gone right for us to have managed this kind of a thing. A couple of things that come out. I think I would probably like to highlight maybe three things. First is what's the vision of the brand? Okay, so as a brand, what do you stand for when it comes to people? Do you stand for respecting an individuality, letting people be, giving people the freedom to bring themselves to the workplace? And this would mean that it's not just for women, it's for anybody. I mean, it is how you bring your personality to work. And we realized that this is something that we were probably doing pretty well. And it's not just a top down or a bottom up approach. It's something that each and every person in the organization believes in. It is something which is inculcated over the years in everyone, and it has happened probably through a lot of maybe sensitization, maybe trainings, maybe having examples in place. So it just has happened that each and every person in the organization inculcates this belief of giving that respect and freedom to each and every individual. I think the second thing that probably has happened is that we have believed first in inclusion, and then the diversity has followed. So, which would mean that we created some things right to have that inclusive culture in place. And then automatically it attracted the right kind of people to join us. And that meant, diverse kind of people. So when people say that, okay, this could be a place where I would not be judged because of my gender or my age or my sexual orientation or where I come from, then I'm going to enjoy working here. And when these kind of stories get out and people start talking about it, you attract more and more of those kind of people. And just like how Padmaja mentioned that, there is a critical mass. So when you see a critical mass of leadership becoming women, it just starts percolating down to others as well. That, okay, this must be a good place for me to work, because it is allowing so many women leaders to come up. And then I think the third thing, which is also important, is how are you communicating your brand story to your external ecospace? Because your business partners, your vendors, your customers, people who are coming to your store, are they buying into your story of diversity? So is your employer value proposition, which is around diversity and inclusion, is it talking to your consumer value proposition? Are they in sync? So we also realized that we are communicating that really well as well. So at our stores, for example, we communicate to our customers that these are our values. And if you come to a store and if you interact with our employees, we would appreciate if you can respect this value that we have. So I think when you do a couple of these things, it starts to become a culture for you, and then it starts to sort of show in the numbers as well. So this is what I think has worked well for Puma.
Very nice. And building on the same, and my question would be for Parmesh now. You talked about values, you talked about culture, and every one of us, when we are at work, when we are at home, we are not only me as an individual, but we also are our community, our family, our culture, and a lot more. So the question for Parmesh is, what unconscious biases are at play here? That's a question. And what is this challenge that we are up against?
So there are many unconscious biases at play, of course, right? Because when you live in heteronormativity, that becomes the norm. And it's something that you said earlier as well. And I think I've tried very hard to correct it in the book. There are two things that people, again, who might be uninformed don't realize, right? The first is that it's a tired trope now, but people think that being LGBTQ, for example, is not a part of Indian culture. And that is such nonsense. And I have a whole chapter in the book where I talk about that, right? It is very much part of our Indian history, Indian culture. We have a very rich history of inclusion and diversity, all the way back to our, to our holy texts of thousands of years ago. So I think it's very important for people to recognize that, in fact, to be Indian is to be inclusive. Homophobia is what is not in our culture. And the homophobia was brought in by the British. They went away 70 odd years ago. Finally, in 2018, Section 377 has gone away. Now we really want to send homophobia back. And maybe we can bring the Kohinoor back in return or something like that. Take your homophobia back, give the Kohinoor diamond is what I'm saying.
That would be fair.
But even if you don't want, fair deal, no? Very good.
Yes,
take it.
absolutely.
We've dealt with your homophobia for 70 years. So I think that is one thing people need to understand, that when you are not being inclusive, you are not being Indian. So you want to be a good Indian, please be inclusive. To WD, to LGBTQ, to every, because we have in our history, we have a long history of inclusiveness on all these dimensions, right? So that is one that I think people, and once people understand, then they get it, right? The second is about families. And I think it's really, really very important. And I think it's important for workplaces also, which are trying to go on the D&I journey. In India, I mean, I'll talk about LGBTQ specifically because, that's the quest I've been on. But in other parts of the world, people assume that you're comfortable with your sexual orientation at home while growing up, and then you come to the workplace and you want equality. I think in India, it is very much the reverse, because very often, I mean, look at the people who are joining workplaces, right? Essentially, it's, and me included, we've spent our whole life giving exams. I don't think I had any deep conversation about my parents, about what matters to me, what is love, what are my values, what are my dreams. It was very much, your 10th board exams are coming, you better study, then 12, then whatever, right? So who are the people who enter our workplaces? It's essentially young people who have given exam after exam, 10th, 12th. At some point, everyone thinks of JEE or any other exam. At some point, someone gives an MBA exam or whatever, right? So you have in our workplaces, we have people who are very good at giving exams, but people who have crushed vital parts of who they are to enter and then emerge out of this funnel into your organization. And that is the truth, right? So the organization has to go way beyond acting like a good company. And this is the argument I make in the book. Your organization in loco parentis. You have to think that your organization, you are a parent of all these people who are entering your workforce. What does it mean to be a good parent is how you have to think about, right? You have to love them, you have to include them, you have to create spaces where they can be, you have to communicate to them that you are valid, we care for you, maybe because you're doing this often to compensate for the kind of broken infrastructures which are there at home. They may not. So in India, at least with LGBTQ, a lot of people come out first at the workplace. Then the workplace gives them that confidence, that infrastructure, so that they can have that conversation at home. It's not the other way around, where you come out, you're comfortable at home, and then you go to the workplace, right? So I think people who are working on this, we really need to think about how it is an imperative to create these inclusive, safe workplaces for our, for all the employees who come in. And I would say, going back to Manisha, I really loved your point about the intersection of EVP and, customer value proposition. I would say this argument extends to the customer as well. You can indicate to the customer that we care about you. We care about what you value. I mean, it's a much deeper bond than just someone who is selling and someone who is buying, right? It becomes, you're a friend, you're an ally, you create a love mark, not just a trademark or a brand, right? And that's the point. So I can ramble on and on, so I'm going to keep quiet now.
Thank you very much, Ramesh. There is a comment from the audience that I want to pick up, because we have not really talked about that and addressed it. We have spoken about the inclusion, but inclusion is fairly broad when we talk about it. We have differently abled people. We have, and also the millennials, because we are all different. So the question I have it, and I'm going to lay it out to the panel. How can an organization become more sensitivity to the differences that exist amongst the workforce? And if we have to include people from all the categories, all the backgrounds that we are talking about, what is it that we should be doing? Is it quota or a reservation, as we call it? Does it work? Or as was tabled earlier, is it the choice of the individual? Or is it the culture? Is it the sensitivity? There's so many things. So I would like to hear, maybe Pallavi, you want to go first, and then we'll have the others.
Sure. So that's a very deep question and a very broad question as well. So I would say that, you know, there are different traits of how we can create an inclusive workplace. But then, as I have been always saying, and all of us have been talking about, is that it is a journey, and we all are on the journey. Be it our employees, be it the leaders, be it the customers, be it the society. Everyone is on the journey. And inclusion is a fact. It exists. We may not know whether we are already in the journey or not, but we are all on the journey. What matters is the different stages that we may be in. So, be it for organizations, Indian organizations, or MNCs, or the society. So I really feel that it's inclusion cannot be forced on people. It cannot be imposed, because organization can be at a certain stage of inclusion, but the individuals can be at a different stage of inclusion. So there is a journey and there is a gap that needs to be bridged, and it has to be customized accordingly. So empathy is a major thing. I'll also add on to what Manisha was referring before, that the organization's values which exist, organization's vision which exist, it has to be practiced. I think the whole journey of inclusion actually is a battle that, as an organization or as a practitioner, we all indulge in, is, how to make that value into practice. How do we demonstrate that intentional inclusion as a practice in our workplace so that employee feels included? Because till every employee feels included, it is not achieved and it is still on. On the diversity aspects which were mentioned, like gender, generations, disability, and age, I would say the diversity of thoughts and diversity of skill is also an area organizations are largely focusing on and have been focusing on. But the conscious effort is now trying to be made there, because again, there is a lot of research which already depicts that there is a very positive productivity which comes out of all this effort of diverse employee workforce and creating an inclusive and equitable work environment. Having said that, I would just like to add another point and then close it. It's now the time, to define how inclusion can be packaged for individuals. And for this, it is very, very important that organizations listen more and more to the people. They have the representation, but not treat them as a diversity statistic. In my work experience so far, I've heard a couple of, the social groups that I am part of. There are a couple of, individuals who are affiliated with certain groups, be it, community of disability or women, or even people who affiliate with a sexual identity. They always say, I don't want to be known for being a diversity stats in the organization. And that's a very, very strong point, that I don't want to be known as Pallavi as a woman here. I want to be known Pallavi for certain skills here, just like any other individual. And similar, that's the aspiration that organizations are looking at. And that is a long journey, but I'm sure it is very, very doable. So so that's what my view is.
I think I could add to what Pallavi also mentioned. So I think it's very valid for people to ask that, okay, we are talking about diversity, but how are you going to make sure that you're actually implementing it in the organization? And what are the things that you will do as a D&I practitioner to manage that? So just like how Pallavi said, that it's a journey that you have to do, and a few operational things that we have to take care, right? Maybe top three. One is, are your policies flexible enough to change with the changing times? And like we said, it's a journey. Today, diversity is something for us. Tomorrow, it could be something else. It's an ever evolving phenomenon. So do you have policies which can be adapted and changed to suit those needs? Second, just like she said, that are you listening to your people? So do you have those listening tools in place where people can come out and have a redressal? They can reach out to the relevant people. Do you have an internal committee who addresses these concerns? That's extremely important. And I think, if you have these two in place, then thirdly, which is kind of a hygiene, is are you doing regular sensitization and training sessions for all levels of people? I mean, of course, these interventions would be different for different levels of people. It would mean different for the leadership team. It would be different for, the senior leadership and the mid-manager and the other levels. But are you doing those interventions? So in my opinion, I think these are the three things that a D&I practitioner has to continuously keep thinking about. Whether you have flexible policies in place, are you doing these, sensitization and training sessions regularly enough? And thirdly, whether you have a right redressal forum and the listening tool in place. This would help to, create that environment of D&I.
Maybe if I could just add on to that, Suresh, just one or two things. Great points from Pallavi and Manisha. I think first, those platforms are actually very, very important. Right? Whether they're in the nature of basic governance systems like your, business conduct, or your team who looks at disrespectful behaviors in the workplace. So everyone should feel that I can speak up, and those teams should be empowered enough. It can either be a tick box, or you can say that, hey, if my ethics and business conduct leader gives me a call, I know I'm in serious trouble, right? It's just about how seriously are some of these platforms taken. Recently, we launched something called the Next Gen Forum. So what is it? It's like a shadow board, right? Which many organizations have done as a practice as well, where you say, you know what, we believe in generational diversity and inclusion. So these are some three problems our organizations facing. We want to hear your views. So you're being open enough to share transparently and get views, right? So those are some examples also of how we can have the tools that Manisha spoke about. I think the sensitization is very, very important. And what is really important there is the role modeling, right? So we have sensitization programs, we have communication, but you know what? Your leadership teams don't role model inclusive behaviors, don't role model listening behaviors. They don't, the teams which cascade all below, if that is not role model, then it's really just like the role modeling from the top is a very, very important element of this. Otherwise, it is tokenism, right? And maybe one more point I just thought is that I thought I would touch on is I think it's important to have the right action at the back end. But while you encourage the culture, you also need the governance that says, okay, let me just do pay equity review by different racial background, identity, gender. Do we find that there is any organization, you have big populations, statistically there's really no need to have any kind of difference, right? So whether you look at pay equity, you look at career progression equity, it's because then everybody realizes that you're serious about these things. You're not just talking about it.
It's a very interesting point, and again, given that you represent PwC, and PwC is amongst many other things also known for their audits, and audits means reporting, and you had touched upon this topic when we were speaking earlier. What gets measured gets reported, and what gets reported obviously becomes public, and the transparency. Do you think there should be, I don't know, it's just a wild thought, but I want to put it on the table. Like many of the things that we are measuring and auditing, should this also be an area which should get audited? And amongst many other things that you talked about, pay equity, promotion equity, roles, leadership roles in diversity. Is that the way to go? Parmesh?
Does Padmaja want to answer that? Yeah, no, I just put my hand because I wanted to make a comment later, but maybe Padmaja after you. Yeah.
Padmaja, would you have a view on this?
I'm sorry, you were talking about pay equity and promotions and whether there should be quotas?
No, what I was saying is that because we do have reporting that we audit, and what gets audited gets the focus because it is reported and it's transparent and it is public information. Yeah. We don't have anything right now which is getting measured and published and audited.
No, it's an interesting point, Suresh, and I have heard both views of this. And sometimes I wonder what my own view is, because I used to feel very passionately that it shouldn't be a number game, right? That it should be a culture of meritocracy and merit will prevail. But I have also heard enough views that argue that that's a very privileged point of view, right? To say that meritocracy will prevail. And it doesn't really take into account that there are differences in terms of a starting point, right? In fact, there was one point that I saw in the chat. One of the questions was about equity versus equality.
Yes.
So it is a privileged point of view, and sometimes it helps to have these. I've also heard the point of view that says, look, you have targets for everything you take seriously as an organization. You have targets on revenue and bottom line and market share. And if this is important enough, why not? So I think it doesn't make sense to run behind only the number, but I would also not feel it's fair to say, hey, we're doing a lot, but the number is not coming, right? I think it has to be both. The number without the substance doesn't make any sense. But if we have so much of substance, then it should result in the number. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's not about tick in the box.
Ramesh, you wanted to say something?
I actually wanted to just add on to the previous question and also a point here. So the previous question was about positive discrimination, and I just wanted to say that yes, I actually believe that having positive discrimination for dimensions of DNI that you want to push on will make a difference, and there are enough examples where this has happened. Even with the UN and so on, they have said, and this has worked in the past, say for gender, saying that we need to have so percentage, because otherwise people come up with innovative ways of for all open positions, but you know what? Everyone we chose happened to be a man or whatever, right? So I think one has to really, really push and maybe not have quotas, because that seems to be like a word that people don't like, but just have very strong indicators of this is where you want to go. Because otherwise people have a bias towards inaction and status quoism. So I think there really needs to be a strong nudge towards positive discrimination, and one can work in an organization however one wants in that. You can have targets linked to compensation. That always works. Trust me, when you tell people your salary is going to be docked if you don't have this, suddenly they find the talent. Isn't that amazing? The people that they were saying earlier, oh, we couldn't find the talent, suddenly when their money is on the line, they find it. So there's various nudges that one can use, but I firmly believe that positive discrimination is the way to go. The second thing is with link to that is, I think a lot of companies waste a lot of time they have this engineering mindset that everything has to be ready, then we will bring in diversity. Whereas today's world, you need design thinking mindset. You need to go in a direction and rapidly iterate. So one thing is, of course, when you have PWD and so on, you need to make sure you have ramps and things like that. But I would say hire a bunch of people and work alongside the people, as well as the incredible community organizations which are out there, and iterate on your journey. Otherwise, you will spend years in thinking, maybe we need a ramp, maybe we need this, maybe we need a crash, maybe we need this. You'll spend so much time in thinking, and there'll be that one person who will always be playing devil's advocate at every meeting. So 5 years will go by and you will not do anything. I would say start now and please iterate, work with the people. If you want to bring more LGBTQ people, it's not like rocket science, but hire some LGBTQ people. We will tell you what we need. If you want to bring more PWD, hire them. No, that's how it works, right? That's number 2. And number 3, in terms of the audit, I think what has really worked in terms of, at least in other parts of the world, are indexes. Again, linked to say what Manisha and Padmaja and others were saying, right? I just want to read out this bit about the human rights campaign in the US from the book, right? We started a corporate equality index some years ago, and they included LGBTQ as a dimension, right? And this is what we are working with a lot of these organizations in India as well. Keshav Suri Foundation, Pride Circle, Stonewall from the UK is launching an LGBTQ equality index this year. Great Place to Work is considering it, and so on, right? Because a lot of companies care about how they're perceived, how they want to attract talent, and so on. Indexes have really worked as an important nudge. So in 2002, for example, when this Human Rights Campaign Index was launched in the US, only 13 companies out of the Fortune 500 received a perfect 100 in terms of LGBTQ, best place to work for LGBTQ equality. This number has went up to 193 businesses in 2019. In 17 years, 180 more companies leapt up and got 100 score. So I think one has to use nudges like these to kind of push.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't want to be having these conversations 5 years down the line, right? I want to move to like more exciting conversations. Whether we should or we shouldn't is like, of course we should. Let's do it.
Exactly.
Just
Pallavi, you wanted to say something? Please.
Just a quick point to make. Just adding on to what Padmaja and Parmeshwar mentioning right now, return on ROI in diversity, actually return on investment, that has been like a new debate coming in, since last 1 year. So every time, and it is always a challenge for diversity practitioners, because justify what was the outcome and annually or whatever, quarterly, etc. While diversity, we have all been saying that it is a gradual process, changing mindset, and it cannot showcase immediate impact as such. It requires at least 2 years span to do a longitudinal study to see how the mindset changes have happened, and that's quite a long duration. So definitely a metric does help. So it is a quantitative measure of diversity, like we're talking about the diversity hiring numbers, or keeping a target on a certain diverse representation at different job levels or certain job roles, or based on certain business, or where we can leverage diversity and how we want to showcase that diversity and take in phase wise in different businesses. So all those things definitely are something like a quick tracker that we can have, because larger outcome and the impact, the stories of actually how a certain program impacted does take a span. Like, it cannot be just a program ended and we say that, okay, this is now the impact, because this is about dealing with the minds of, lakhs of employees, and it cannot be changed in a shorter thing. So it does help to have, a proper diversity metric, and also building it into the risk framework of organization. I think most of the organization do have it there. So, it is subject to audits on a regular basis on certain critical elements on talent of what other areas, be it hiring, be it the succession planning of the organization, promotion cycles, etc. And even certain organizations have gone beyond, like tracking it, and how even the conversations, the appraisal conversations, tracking those conversations of how inclusive they were, or whether they were inclusive, or it was just one-way conversation which was assumed to be inclusive. Because there's also a very funny thing that, if two people are talking, it's considered inclusive, whether it was inclusive or not. So we have to see that it's not just having two people talking to each other, but that conversation needs to be inclusive as well. So that definitely helps to track it.
I think I would just add one more point to this. I think what Parmesh said makes a lot of sense. One cannot do without the other. So while we will focus on creating the culture and creating the right, right place to work, but if you're not tracking metrics, then this cannot work. So one cannot work without the other. So it's extremely important to have both the things in place. And so I totally agree that, both are important in their own right to have in place.
One thought that comes to my mind, and maybe it's the nature of the times that we are in. The world is moving away from globalization and inclusion to more of nationhood. We are seeing this in US right now. We are seeing this in many other parts of the world, and we are seeing it in India, because we're talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we're talking about Make in India. So what I was reading is that we cannot leave this to the government or the governments, because they are focused on too many things which are good, hopefully, which are good for the country. And also, given the fact that organizations are becoming larger and larger, and the heft that they have and the resources that they manage, in many cases, are even larger than some of the countries. So do you think it's time for the organizations to take the leadership and drive this agenda rather than leaving it to the Supreme Court, or I don't know whether it is possible, but maybe it's a hypothetical question. What role should organizations play in making D&I happen?
Maybe if I can go on that, Suresh.
Yes.
But I think organizations have a huge role to play. Obviously, we shouldn't. I think the role has to come from different places, right? There is legislative change required. There could be infrastructural, aspects at a country level. So it's required at different levels, whether it's judiciary or the executive. But organizations have a huge role to play, right? In today's world, I think the role of the private sector is going to become bigger and bigger with the whole asymmetry that's happening in the world. I think we have such a big chance to, I wouldn't want to use the word influence, but to actually get everyone who's coming into a workplace to think about value systems, right? I mean, Parmesh spoke about how, see, we are all products of, decades of instilling certain thoughts, right? I mean, very often, I may think I'm extremely open-minded and my children convince me that I'm not. That, I mean, they make me realize that no, I'm so much a product of value systems that have been instilled into me over the years, right? And maybe I don't even question many of them. And as we have, our organizations are a melting pot. You have, so many different generations, you have people from so many different backgrounds, and then which are there. And as organizations, if you can help people to understand, let's question some of these value systems, right? We can still hold traditions dear, but why should we assume certain things? As simple as, the use of gender in something, right? It's always like he or she, maybe something as simple as that, right? Why do we assume that flexibility is required only for women employees, right? So I think we can do a big role in terms of just helping workforce that come in, just think about creating a more equitable and inclusive society, and just think about the impact that could have. Because then it is, young workforce come in, you help them think about these things, they raise their children differently. I think we have a huge responsibility and we cannot shirk away from it.
Exactly.
So we have to focus on it.
Parmesh, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it is vital that organizations work with other stakeholders in multiple ways. And we saw post-COVID, right? We saw so much of the relief only happened when there was corporate money and intent alongside the NGO network on the ground, but alongside the government infrastructure and enablement that actually happened so much of this relief, that actually made this relief work happen so that relief could reach marginalized sections of society, right? I think the future is contingent on everyone working together and all of us, in a sense, understanding that we are all stakeholders in solving some of our planet's great issues. If we don't work together, we will not, on climate change, we will not have a planet. Then what is the point of selling shoes or now anything that Reliance is doing, whether groceries or oil or PwC or whatever we do at Godrej? We're all going to die because there won't be any planet. So we have to work together. So I think it's fundamental that we stop thinking that we are siloed stakeholders, understand that only when we collaborate are we going to have any chance of success. Now, there's two ways I think that companies can collaborate with other stakeholders, right? Especially government. I think, because to me, I think the governments are the key, national and state level. Even in terms of employment, all the talk we do on D&I and our private sector is nothing if we can, in terms of the D&I that is possible in the public sector. Right? I mean, so I think companies need to do two things. One is we really need to collaborate with state and national governments on multiple projects in different ways to push for the change that we want to see. We can do this by role modeling excellence in our own organizations, showcase it to them. So many times we have advisory capacities, and that's my second thing, right? How can we nudge various governments to adopt some of these best practices? Because we are parts, I mean, I think in the world we live in, I think corporations have more negotiation or influence with state and national level governments than NGOs and other well-meaning stakeholders in society. So I think how we use that position to say, This is why climate change is important. This is why LGBTQ rights are important. This is why we need to create these laws that protect women and so on, right? So I think it's very vital for our own success, but also for larger societal success that we collaborate.
Sorry, I'm muted. One question that comes to mind, and I think our conversation today would be incomplete if we don't pick it up, is the startup ecosystem in India. And it's vibrant, it is large, it is growing, it's attracting capital. And even within larger organizations like Reliance, we have so many incubators and startups which are suddenly they pop up one day and we get a $20 billion company. So what do you see happening in the startup world? Because Bangalore, NCR, Hyderabad, Chennai, we've got these very large centers today with a lot of action. What do you see happening there? Manisha, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think very relevant because especially being in Bangalore, you are in the hub of all the startup revolution that has happened in the last 10 years that I've seen. I mean, there's a lot of action that has happened. So when it comes to diversity and startup, I personally think, and this is what I have also observed, that somehow it has promoted a lot of diversity. It also comes from the fact that the people who have founded these startups, for example, most of them have come from a very different mindset, from a very diverse mindset, so to speak, right? Most of them have been these people who defied norms, who did not believe in whatever regular paths were. So I have personally seen that they are very open to having diverse kind of talents working with them, and I think that has helped overall for corporates to change, and how corporates look at say women, how corporates look at women who are coming back to work. I think a lot of this good work has definitely been done by the startups.
Pallavi, your thoughts on the startup world?
So I think just to build on what Manisha was sharing, it's about which is the group which is starting. So if it is again a millennial group which is taking it up, they are quite familiar with this whole buzz of diversity and inclusion because this is the era we have been talking about it, and making it a part of their routine organization is not a very I would say easy, but I would say that it's not as difficult. So that is somewhere reflected. Also, each of the startups are also very clear on what is the need they are addressing, and there are certain startups which are actually aiming to cater to a certain group, and so that representation, so that so there is a minority-owned startups also coming up. When I'm saying minority, I'm using this word which I'm not very comfortable with, but I just ended up using it. So we call it minority-owned, but actually the diversity groups, people who believe that okay, these are something which is who are not getting the right privileges, or we want to address those needs of that particular group, and so we come up. So I think they are very, very conscious, and their efforts are also very targeted to such needs of such diverse groups. So largely diversity of skills and diversity of thoughts are the two key areas which we can see clearly that it's playing in, and which is leading to very high collaboration, and that whole connectedness of creating that very agile organization and trying to create some impact very quickly. That's the approach that we are looking at, which is very different in the startup world. But yeah, they do have their own constraint as well. And I think as they grow and how they evolve and how they nurture, and over a few years down the line, it will be interesting to see how they are establishing a new narrative of diversity and inclusion, because it's more about them on equitable workplace, while the larger organizations we have been starting from defining equality first. So there has been a lot of I would again use the word, borrow the word from Parmesh, a lot of engineering has been done, saying that what does that inclusion look like for us, etc., etc. While it doesn't look like anything, it feels like, and we are all feeling it right now, living it right now, and we're living it till we are there. So I think that will be interesting to see.
I was reading the paper. I think it was today or yesterday. We have a new CEO for Citibank. She's a woman. For the first time, a global bank is getting a woman CEO of that size. So the question, because we're talking about leadership and we're talking about the startup. So a thought that is coming to my mind, I again want to put it on the table to get the views from the panel. Does it make a difference to have a woman leader at the top? For different reasons, we keep reading women are they're more sensitive, they have a much higher EQ than men, they are inclusive, they can manage conflicts better, and we have also had some recent examples during COVID when people were talking about the countries which are led by women faring a little better than the rest of the countries. So what do you think about this aspect of leadership driven D&I initiatives if you have women leadership driving it?
Maybe if I can, sorry, would someone else like to go first?
No, please go ahead, Padmaja.
So Suresh, my thoughts are, I would hate to generalize because sometimes this is not about gender, right? To me, it's sort of well said, right? Gender is a social construct. So it is, you can have certain behaviors. I would hate to generalize and say that, women are more nurturing and men are more aggressive. You always have the exception, right? But I think if you allow an inclusive workplace, an inclusive environment, whether it's in the government or the country or the corporate office, then you just allow people to be more comfortable with their natural styles. And I would think if you're a certain gender and you've grown up just knowing that most leaders are of the other gender, I'm sure your own style also will change, right? Because you will adapt to your this thing. So I would hate to generalize. Having said that, I guess a lot of studies have shown that maybe everything else being equal, maybe women are more nurturing, more try to get the best out of others, maybe are more collaborative. So I guess if you provide, it's a complementary, leadership styles, and if you provide an environment where everyone feels comfortable being themselves, then you just bring the best out of whoever it is, right? The man or the woman. So that's my 2 bits.
Manisha, you wanted to say something on this.
Yeah, no, so I think Padmaja has actually summarized it really well. It's not so much about gender generalizations. It is about having a culture where everybody can thrive. And yes, studies have shown that certain genders bring in a certain attribute, but how that attribute actually results in achievements and results, it depends on so many different variables. It depends on, your team, your hard work, your perseverance, your strategic acumen. So there is a lot that goes on to make a leader a successful leader. And it's not just the gender. So I don't think it's so much about the gender, but it's about the person.
Ramesh?
Yeah, I think it's less about the gender or whatever aspect of diversity that you're talking about, and a lot about perception of what people think. So we really need to work, which is why this work on creating that culture all around is so important, right? It's like Tim Cook, it's people won't talk about how so many CEOs across the world conversation, but about Tim Cook, they will say the Apple CEO happens to be gay, and has being LGBTQ affected you? No one, any straight CEOs, how has being straight affected you? So why should you ask a queer person that? So no one asks male CEOs. If the Citibank new CEO was male, we wouldn't be saying, how has being male affected you? Tell us about masculinity. Do you feel men are more like this or that? So I think we need to just create a culture where we stop correlating attributes with people's genders, and in the company, in the market, and just, all around. And that's a lot of work that we have to do. And we can role model, we need to be role modeling this better behavior all along. And I mean, I see this all the time. So I'm a TED senior fellow, so I go to TED every year in Vancouver. And it's so interesting. Even at a well-meaning TED conference, whenever there's a Q&A format, if Elon Musk is on stage and they're doing a Q&A with Elon Musk, they will talk to him about engineering. If Serena Williams is on stage, they will talk to her about, has being a wife and mother affected your tennis skills? I mean, seriously, and this is the point. And so this is what happens at leadership level as well. And it frustrates me, but I'm working very hard with my therapist to convert that frustration into a positive, productive energy. So I'm going to take a breath and breathe. But I think we need to stop this very, very soon.
Point taken, Parmesh.
Just one-
Pallavi, you want to say something? Yeah, I'm aware of the time. I have to hand it back to Deepak, but would love to hear Pallavi what you want to say before we wrap up.
Yeah, so just a quick, statement that I wanted to add on, just building on to all the other speakers who have been talking about it. It's very important that in this, in this work towards inclusion that we are trying to do and, create an inclusive society at large and inclusive workplace to begin with. It's very important to see that we don't start creating new stereotypes and tags, So, because I was just remembering an example where we were talking about women leadership, women leadership program. That's a very buzzword across the corporates and now also the institutes actually and the universities. So women leadership, and there are a lot of management grads and scholars who actually challenged the whole idea, and they were questioning that why do women need a leadership program? Like that itself. If we have a equal educational qualification experience, why do you need a specific women leadership program? And then we went about doing a lot of research, and this happened in the other MNC where I was working, and we found a very interesting research which actually talked about the second generation bias, which is actually about the social conditioning we have been talking about. And it applies to both men, women, and all the individuals, all human beings actually, with whatever diversity aspects we are in. So it's largely about our, identifying the leader within ourselves, which is equally important for any individual who is aspiring to be a leader, and in that defined leader, whatever that right leadership appears to be. So it is very important. So I just thought I'll mention, that creating new tags and, creating new stereotype, it will work for us like, diversity professional. We'll keep, challenging those and doing our work, but, that is not going to create inclusion. So it's a very conscious effort to ensure that in the course of creating inclusion, we are not ending up creating a new set of labels and tags and trying to again address them in the future.
Very, very valid point, Pallavi. Thank you for sharing. So that brings us to the end of this conversation. Most interesting. So many points that got raised. It's going to take me a while to put them all together. Hopefully, I will take away a few of those to practice. I think that's what the intent is. So I would like to thank each one of you, Manisha, Pallavi, Padmaja, Parmesh, for being very open. You shared quite a bit of information and intel for all of us to digest. I'll hand it back to Deepak from here. Deepak, over to you.
Suresh, outstanding conversation. And, Suresh Rana is a star in any team. So beautifully moderated. And Padmaja, Manisha, Parmesh, Pallavi, great insight. We still have a long way to go for an authentic so-called DNI. That's the way I will say it. And so yes, let's keep working on how we can help everyone find their place in the world. And it is famously said, we are smart alone, but together we are genius. So, yeah, so let's do that way. So, we at CEO Lounge also gets to know the leaders beyond their work. So let's make an attempt of having a little chit chat with everyone. And maybe I could start with Manisha. And Manisha, I must compliment first that, Puma India has been at the forefront when it comes to valuing women's sports person. And Puma has played such a key role in the journey of Mary Kom, Duty Chand, and so has Virat Kohli. But personally, which is the sports which excites you the most?
Okay, so frankly I don't play sports, but I love to watch cricket and tennis. So now with my son, who's a football fanatic, so I end up watching a little bit of football with him. But I personally don't play. So, but yes, I like to run and I like to follow my fitness. But yeah, that's where it is.
Excellent. And which is the IPL team you're putting your monies behind?
Let's see. I haven't really thought. I think I will go with my son's decision. We still have to make up our mind on this.
Good. Padmaja, you have been playing a very active role with social venture partners, and what are those key works that you are currently passionately working on with SVP?
I'm sorry, Deepak, I lost you for 30 seconds. I heard you raise the social venture partners and then I lost you. I'm sorry.
I said you have played such a key role with them. In fact, you are a founding partner for social venture partners here in Bangalore. What were the key passionate areas that you personally working on at this point of time?
Okay. So I guess, Deepak, like I'm sure many others who've spent some time in the corporate world, you start realizing that you want to do more, right? And you feel you're just so privileged and you want to help and give back. And I think Social Venture Partners was an attempt at that. While I'm a founding partner, I actually have a very small role to play. There are so many others who are very, very active. But what we've tried to do is to contribute not just money, but even our management capability to a lot of smaller organizations in the not-for-profit space who need that. And I think if we are all able to do it, I mean, what a difference it makes, right? So it's just an attempt to try and broaden horizons and do something beyond what we do every day. Work with organizations who are supporting differently abled, something more recently in education. So 2-3 different areas trying to learn and upskill myself also.
Beautiful. Parmesh, your work list beyond Godrej is huge. I can keep going on. Your role with the DNI Task Force, Coach International Artist. You're one of those 25 Indians to watch for. Your bestsellers with the Gay Bombay first, and now with Kurdistan making all the right noises. But what excites you more? Is it fashion or is it writing? You've been on a jury of fashion awards and communication degrees. Which is the one which excites you more here?
Undoubtedly fashion. And right now, in the middle of this pandemic, there was a point before when I was like, oh God, another party. We have to dress up again. Give me just let things start again. I will go to every party possible. I'm a bit of both. I'm introverted as well as extroverted. So when I'm introverted, I like my space, but I also really like going out and connecting with people. For me, art, fashion, design, these are all spaces where we can all express our creativity and our individuality. I have so many friends across them, and I actually see, in one of my previous jobs, I used to help a venture fund. So I see very clear linkages between the India which is emerging through design, through fashion, through creativity, through cinema, and the India which is emerging through entrepreneurship, technology, and so many of these other spaces as well. So I love dressing up and immersing myself in all these different worlds. And, it's certainly more fun than writing. Writing to me is, I hate the writing process. I like what comes out of it, but that writing process is, I'm full of insecurity and self-doubt, and I rewrite, and for me writing is extremely torturous. It's a torturous process that I do because I really want something to say at the end of it. But undoubtedly, going to the art fair, being papped, going to fashion week and pouting galore is way more fun than writing.
But I'm in no doubt the third book is already moving across in your head, Parmesh. But tell us,
I just want to say, and the team that I'm putting, I don't bet, I don't put money on, but I think this year Rajasthan Royals have a very good chance. I think it's about time. So I used to be a Hyderabad fan, but this season I'm shifting loyalties to the Royals. So if any Royal fans are out there, actually I've been answering a lot of questions in the Q&A as well. So any Royal fans out there, please, send me a message.
No, I still stand with Dhoni. So for me, it's Chennai. So, well, Parvesh, tell us the paparazzi following you at the Sydney airport. You spoke about fashion. Would be lovely to hear that story very briefly over here. Yeah.
So that was my misconception that writers can also be, celebrities. I lost that bhram very early, because I reached Sydney to give a lecture at a media conference, and I thought, in my old world, a talk about digital India at a media conference in Sydney, in my mind I was flying. So of course I rolled my trolley out of the airport, and there were so many photographers, and I was like, that's so nice, they're here for me. And so I did my first pose, and they just ran, they brushed, they elbowed past me, and Nicole Richie was behind me at that time. And, it was all for her. So then I understood, writers, there's only so much you can get, So I'm so glad you invited me on this round table, but this is the extent of the attention. The real paps go to celebs. It's okay. It's fine.
Well, Pallavi, Reliance is making all the right noises during the COVID. So I'm in no doubt that the employees at the Reliance Industries probably feeling the most secure than anybody else in the corporate world. But has these 6 months given you a chance to learn or to do something new, which you always wanted to cross?
Yeah, so I think I would say the lockdown story, I think everyone has a lockdown story. so definitely even I do have one. So I have taken like a couple of my interest areas during this lockdown. So I really, I used to do drawing words. So basically the name, and I can tell the story, like I can draw the story of a person on the name itself. That's the concept. So I try to do that. I've picked it up again, and I've started making stories using the drawing words. I do a lot of nature work, like using the dried leaves and twigs, etc., and creating artwork around it, because for me that is very healing. That's what I look at it. So I've been picking up on certain things which I think I was not able to do in last 1 year. So I think in lockdown, that's beyond work. Those are some things that I have been pursuing on. And, also doing a lot of work with my 5-year-old daughter, making some children book through, pictures, and trying to just put all my thoughts and whatever creativity together with her, and trying to look at the world from her lens as well, because it's really nice to see, discovering self and discovering how the world is, very biased from children's point of view as well. So those are some things that I've been doing, yeah, and some are non-interesting stuff as well. So
interesting, wonderful. And Suresh, you are an evergreen person. Your youthfulness, we all know, comes from yoga that you've been practicing for years. You're a marathon runner. It's known to everyone. But you also work with a lot of non-profit organizations, if I'm not wrong. Tell us some work of yours in that space here.
Very kind of you, Deepak, to raise all of these. But I think what I have been doing, and maybe it's a slow drift that has happened, and also a lot to do with the space that I'm in, which is leadership hiring. So my world has shrunk, really shrunk, to only work with leaders. I don't know if it's a good or bad, but that is what I do entire day. So what I have ended up working in is, how can I help people? And that can only help when you can first help yourself, to be able to first understand what leadership is about, and then when you're working with the leaders and your clients. So what I do to a large extent is I coach people, and I do it pro bono. And I think there are still some people who believe I can help. So I do end up with some conversations that happen almost every day, where I'm listening, I'm curious, I ask questions, and both me and my client, we try and figure out a way that can help him or her in some way. That's it.
And the IPL team you want to bet on, Suresh?
It has to be wherever Suresh Raina is. Unfortunately, he's not there, but I'll still support the team.
Excellent. So we in a same team together, yes. Because I know Manisha is going to be the royal challengers for Virat Kohli, but yeah, good. So let's beat them hard, you know. So thank you, folks. I think outstanding conversation, and thank you very much for your time, and thanks to all the audience for being some great listener. And I will see you all next Saturday with a fresh topic on how the workspaces got impacted post COVID. And until then, take good care of yourself and be healthy, be safe. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepak. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.